Okay. As the Institute approaches Goal 4, it is extremely reflective to me of the fact that all of the community based organizations, the churches, the sororities, the fraternities, the business organizations that have conferences and workshops, they are generally subject to only one discipline. While the issues of education for children of African ancestry are flavored by health, housing, economics, the criminal justice system, the medical community, and all of the other disciplines that impact what happens to this child. For example, in public housing very often does not have doors on any room except the bathrooms. So when we theoretically talk about a quiet place to study, it isn't possible for many people. It's also true if you live in temporary housing, where there may be 4 or 5 families sharing a single bathroom, and you wonder why the children get to school late. I am saying that these organizations are functioning, but they function isolated from each other. And I believe that at least once a year, leaders in the African American community should come together in their discipline and look at the issues of academic achievement, cultural advancement, and tell how they can contribute to it, and come back the next year and say, well, I've talked to the people in public housing and we may be able to arrange to have doors on the rooms. No big deal, but a very big deal for those children. For the people who live in temporary housing and you've got 5 and 6 families using the same bathroom, the school needs to know that and to know the impact that that has on children coming to school on time, the time factor. And then when we do it that way, we are in a position to affect public policy. Because regardless to what any of these disciplines do in isolation, unless it gets to public policy development, it's an exercise in futility. And when I was served on the Board of Regents, I was struck by the fact that so many other ethnic groups have advocacy groups or they have media groups at the Regents meeting who are talking to the Regents who develop public policy in terms of academics. That they understand how the educational system functions federally, statewide, and locally, and who makes those policies. For years, there was no one connected to the community of people of African ancestry who were involved in impacting public policy. Now, we don't elect members of the Board of Regents, but the legislators do, and we elect the legislators who elect them. Now, in some states, it's the governor that appoints the members of the Board of Education. New York is one of those that has the most powerful board because it has elementary, middle, secondary, college, museums, libraries, education in the prisons, and we license and regulate more than 50 professions. Now, that's information that many parents don't have. For example, if you use the services of a person who is licensed by the state of New York, and you feel that your rights have not been addressed or the product has not been up to standard or you have been treated disrespectfully, you can appeal to the Board of Regents to examine your complaint. And they can have a hearing They can remove that person's professional license. They can send them back to school. They can fine them. There are a number of actions that the members of the Board of Regents can take against that licensed professional, whether it's a landscape designer, uh, uh, whatever that profession is, whether it's an architect. But teaching is not a licensed profession. So that if a parent does not have a teacher who is certified teaching in the certification area, if the child does not have a full day of school, if the child has inadequate textbooks, doesn't have labs, they have nowhere to go because teaching is not a profession. It's not a licensed profession like the more than 50 others. So that if you are a teacher or a principal, you have no adjudicative process. Sometimes you don't even know that you don't have it. There are times when there were efforts made to allow the public to know that they don't have a channel, but you do have the regents that represents your judicial district, and you do have the capacity to impact that regent. And if you're not satisfied with the response, you have an opportunity to speak to the senators or the members of the assembly that elect that person. So the issue of public policy development can be a recommendation, but it can be more than that. There can be force behind it. There is a federal law of civil rights in education. And some years back, through Congresswoman Clark, Yvette Clark, some members of the African American community had a meeting with the person who was the director of that Office of Civil Rights in Education, that had an office that had not been activated for years, even though they had a staff. And in meeting with her, she said that even if we fail, she said, if you give us a reason to investigate an issue, we will investigate it. And that will make some difference. She said most of the policy complaints that they had dealt with the translation of notices to parents in foreign languages, the instances of a report card that is only in English, and they addressed those issues. But if you don't know that that federal law and that federal office exists, you can't effectuate it. So the fourth goal, which is to impact public policy, is extremely important because all of the efforts that we have, all of the organizations and all of the conferences and forums that we have that deal with these issues, but don't affect public policy because when they leave, they go home. But nobody sends a notice to the members of the Board of Regents or the members of the Assembly or the Senate on the state level and say, we are concerned about the lack of public policy in this area so that that public policy can be addressed. So it's an enormously important. And it's enormously important that we rally all of these institutions, disciplines, professions that impact how a child succeeds, the food that they eat, the medicine that they take, their eyes, their ears, all of that affects public policy, so that children's eyes are not just examined by a school aide with an eye chart that the children can memorize, but that they get a pediatric ophthalmologist where there are large numbers of children who are having difficulty with reading. And when we did that, we were able to develop a program that took the children to a pediatric ophthalmologist, and we found that almost 80% of the children had some vision problem, not just seeing the print, but in moving the eyes from right to left, having both eyes focus the same, that you can have all kinds of remedial reading programs and remedial reading teachers, and if you're not looking at the reason why that child physically is not seeing or is not hearing, you're not getting very far except increasing your statistic. Now, we know that people of African ancestry have less access to good medicine. We know that from medical apartheid and all of the other kinds of information that has been written telling uh, what has happened, including the Tuskegee experiment, but it has not developed into public policy. When Margaret Washington writes the book, Medical Apartheid, we read it. But what do we do in terms of getting public policy to address those issues, to recognize what has happened and is still happening in penal institutions, where juveniles are in institutions with seniors? So the effective promotion of institutes, conferences, and forums that address the development of a change in public policy is extremely vital to the success of children of African ancestry and their progeny. Thank you.